If you spend enough time digging through the massive PS2 library, you know it's packed with hundreds of games most people have never even heard of. Some are hidden gems, others are forgotten for a reason. While searching for the least played PS2 game of all time, I stumbled onto McFarlene's Evil Prophecy, a title so far off the radar, I'd wager most of you have never even heard of it, let alone seen the cover art for it. But when you hear Todd McFarlane's name, the creative force behind Spawn and some of the most striking dark fantasy art of the past 30 years, you'd expect something special. But the reality? Let's just say that this is a textbook example of wasted potential on a very unique idea. This is Retro Revisit on McFarlene's Evil Prophecy. Released in 2004 by Konami and developed by Blue Monkey Studios, Evil Prophecy is a third-person hack-and-slash adventure set in a supernatural 19th century. You would probably expect Evil Prophecy to be based on a movie, a show, or even a comic, but no. This game actually came from Todd McFarlane's Monster toy line, a short-lived series of spooky action figures from the late 90s, which really intrigued me because I actually have a collection of his Mortal Kombat figures and never knew this line of figures existed until after playing through this game. I should hunt some down myself. But the story of this game is simple. The dead are rising from their graves, and monsters are spreading chaos all over the world. Fearing that the end of days is near, an ancient book predicts the beginning of an eternal age of darkness on Earth. To stop it, Dr. Hans Jaeger summons three of the world's best monster hunters, Logan the pirate, Delphine the gunslinger, and Sundano, a mystical African warrior. Together, they set out to track down legendary creatures like Dracula, the Mummy, and werewolves before these monsters can usher in the apocalypse. On paper, it sounds like a fantastic pitch, having classic horror icons, a diverse cast of characters, and plenty of potential for action-packed set pieces. But in execution, the game feels like it needed some more polish, creativity, and heart to truly bring that concept to life. From the second the game booted, I actually had high hopes though. The intro cutscene was a very Scooby-Doo-esque animation with McFarlane's art style showcasing all the monsters you'll face throughout the game. But as the cutscene fades, the looming doubt of this game started to set in. The first thing that immediately grabbed my attention about this game was the ability to switch between the four hunters as much as you want, each with unique attacks, combos, and abilities to plow through waves of enemies before taking on a boss, which is a nice idea, but it never feels like the game fully capitalized on that mechanic. Throughout the first couple hours of my gameplay, it never felt like there was an advantage to using a specific character to kill the monsters, more of just a personal preference of who you really wanted to play as. At first, I liked playing as Delphine and Sundano, but as I progressed through the game, I started to prefer Dr. Jaeger and Sundano. Logan is a heavy hitter, but I'm not much of a fan of his grenade-based abilities, and I wanted to play as Delphine for her gun abilities, but honestly, they're the weakest out of the four heroes. I like Sundano because he has a cool whirlwind ability and can throw his boomerang scythe hybrid, and Dr. Jaeger has some smooth combos and the strongest electric abilities, which are great for dealing with big clumps of enemies. The combat is an area that could definitely use some refinement though, but it's not the worst thing I've played. It's your classic beat 'em up format, but with a few sluggish combos and some weird hit detections that make the timings feel a bit off. It's not broken, it just lacks the tightness compared to some of the other better PS2 action games from the era. Throughout the first monster area, I hated how limited the combos felt, but as you level up by beating the hell out of a lot of monsters, your combos upgrade and you start to figure out how to string them together better. I really dug the sense of progression in the combat, and it made it feel like I was actually learning something instead of just button mashing through the entire game. The enemy variety is actually pretty good as well. You'll fight deep-sea monsters, mummies, werewolves, and other genre staples. Each mob you fight will thematically coordinate with the monster you're hunting down. The boss fights against the mainline monsters are easily the highlight of this whole game. The fights themselves aren't too much of a challenge once you learn the moves and the rhythm of timings, but it's cool to see just how intricate the boss fights were designed, and if you think about it, they made a blueprint for what would go on to inspire the boss fights you see in Souls-likes and other modern-day games. Outside of the bosses being designed by McFarlane's figures, I don't think the developers did justice to Todd McFarlane's art style. Given his name, you'd expect intricate creature designs and a world dripping with atmosphere. And unfortunately, while some of the monsters do have some flair, the overall art direction feels pretty tame. Environments are muddy and repetitive, often reduced to self-guided tunnels with bland textures and little sense of world building. The game is entirely linear. You move forward, clear an area of enemies, and repeat until you hit the boss. And I understand most beat 'em ups have this format, but not to this extent of barren levels. There's little incentive to explore, and environments recycle assets often. Some levels do look better than others later in the game, but most feel like they could be from almost any budget PS2 action game. The gothic vibe just never fully reaches that level of dark fantasy spectacle. It's competent but far from the kind of visual statement McFarlane's brand implies. And to make matters worse, the cutscenes and audio don't do much support for the vision either. The soundtrack is practically non-existent and completely forgettable, made up of just generic orchestral cues that awkwardly fade in and out near the end of levels. Sound effects are serviceable, but there's literally no voice acting in this game, which makes cutscenes and character interactions feel flat and disconnected from the gameplay. The audio design does just enough to function, but leaves no lasting impression. Proper voice acting alone would have elevated the story and strengthened the player's connection 100 times over, but instead, it was just another missed opportunity. At roughly 10 hours, Evil Prophecy is short, and while you could replay the game on higher difficulties, there's not much of a reward for doing so. Once you've seen the bosses, you've seen the game's biggest selling point. McFarlane's Evil Prophecy had the potential to be a stylish, memorable monster hunting game, but unfortunately to some, it's a forgettable hack and slash with flashes of charm buried under repetitive gameplay and dated visuals. It's not unplayable. In fact, there's a strange fascination into seeing what it tried to do, but it's easy to understand why it slipped into obscurity. After each play session, I would honestly find myself looking forward to coming back the next day. Why though? I have no idea. For PS2 collectors or fans of McFarlane, it's worth owning just for the curiosity factor, but for everyone else, it's a reminder that a great concept on paper doesn't always translate to a great game. Thank you guys as always for watching this episode of Retro Revisit. If you've actually ever played Evil Prophecy, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because finding someone who has might be rarer than tracking down Dracula himself. And if you have any requests of what game I should try next, leave it in the comments below. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video.